Hi everyone, my name is John. I'm 19 and I'm from Galway City. Admittedly, my accent isn't very thick, and this has caused some confusion here in the community as to where I'm actually from. Some people have been suggesting that I'm from Sligo, but just to clarify, I'm a proud Galway man. Up the tribesmen! Like a lot of people in Ireland, I was brought up in a Catholic family. My parents had a very deep faith, and it was an important part of our upbringing. We did all the usual things that you'd expect. We went to Mass every Sunday, we'd pray some prayers going into school each day, and until I was about 12 years old, I went to a catechesis group for little children most Monday evenings, which my mum ran. I wasn't always very enthusiastic about it, mind you. I believed that God was real and understood that faith must be important because Mum and Dad placed so much time and effort into it. But I didn't have a personal relationship with God. I believed that God had made everything and everyone, but found it very hard to believe that He cared deeply about me personally. I remember one time when I was 9 or 10, I heard the story of King David and how he had a heart like God's. I remember praying to God and asking if I could have a heart like his too. Little did I know how much I was asking for. From a young age, I was diagnosed with dyspraxia. For those who may not know, this means that I can struggle with things like coordination. I can find it very hard to focus at times, and sometimes can suffer from insecurities. As a result of having dyspraxia, I struggle to do certain activities that other kids would take for granted, like sports, or even something as simple as tying a shoelace. I would sometimes get overwhelmed by things going on around me, and I had a strong tendency to withdraw into myself, especially with other people I didn't know or didn't like. At times, it was a great mental battle just to get an ordinary job done right. My greatest difficulties, however, were in my social life and in trying new things. This regularly caused feelings of being overwhelmed and anxiety at times. This led me to believe that there was something wrong with me. I felt that I wasn't good enough at times and that I could not really be loved by others. I never stopped to consider what God thought of me. Instead, I believed I could only be happy if other people liked me. At school, I got slagged for my faith. Other people called me the priest, simply because I actually believed in God. In fact, I remember one time I was leaving school through the side gate and was walking along the footpath towards home when two lads from my class cycled past me and called out, "How are you, Father?" I know now that they were only teasing me, but at the time it hurt me. To me, it reinforced the lie that I was different and others couldn't accept me. Even though I felt like the odd one out, I still kept practicing my faith. I never doubted that God was real or that Jesus died for my sins. Where I really struggled was in simply that believing that God really loved me, that He cared about me and wanted to look after me. I didn't really think that God wanted to be my friend, as I had never really encountered His love in my life, or at least that's what I thought. He had always seemed frustratingly distant. I loved video games when I was younger, as they came easy to me. So for most of my life, I hung around exclusively with people who were into them. However, these people quickly became more and more hostile, especially during the first 3 years of secondary school. It reached a point in my junior cert year where I was rejected harshly by the group of people I regularly hung around with in school. I had fallen out with friends a few times before, but this time it really wounded me, as I had never been rejected by so many people. I remember feeling like a sword had pierced right through my heart, and the lies I believed about myself and my own insecurities only made it worse. More than ever, I struggled to believe that God wanted my good. He seemed more distant than ever. Nevertheless, even in this hardship, the Father's hand was at work, guiding me closer to Him. There were ordinary saving graces that I didn't even realize were God's hand at work. For example, during lunchtime when I was in secondary school, I had the chance to walk only about 5 or 10 minutes down the road to my granny's house. She was and still is one of my strongest supporters. I could talk to her about anything, and I knew that she would give great advice and encouragement. Truly, her impact on my life, particularly my faith journey, cannot be understated. As well as that, the hardship in school opened up for me new opportunities to find new friends, particularly friends in the faith. In 2018, I got the chance to go to my first Camp Veritas, which is a Catholic teen summer camp. I also attended a retreat with my family called Cana, which is a couples and families retreat held in the summer. Through these retreats, God gave me the opportunity to meet other Catholics my age, friends that were actually into their Catholic faith. I slowly began to see that God did care about me and that He wanted me to have good friends who could accept me as I was. But even with these blessings, I still really struggled to have a meaningful prayer life. I knew I needed God in my life, but I was finding it very difficult to connect with Him. I also knew that before I went into college, I wanted to develop my relationship with Him. In my head, I knew I wasn't ready for college, so I decided to look more thoroughly at my options. I knew people who had done a year at Holy Family Mission, and when I met them afterwards, I could see a big difference in them. They were more confident, more self-assured, and definitely more at peace with themselves. I realized that this was something I wanted. So I looked into it and found that their charism was forming young people in knowing themselves and knowing God better, and living together with other like-minded young people. I knew this is what I wanted and needed, so I applied, and thank God I got accepted. When I first arrived here, I struggled as I was still hurting inside, and I continued to believe the lies in my heart, that I wouldn't measure up, that I couldn't do what was being asked of me. What's worse, about a week after arriving here, I got COVID. And on my birthday, no less. Thankfully, after some time in isolation, I was more or less back to normal again and able to participate in community life properly again. However, it wasn't long before we all sat down to talk about our testimonies and how to do them. I really wasn't sure what to say about my own testimony, as I was still finding it difficult to see how God was working in my life. Also, I still doubted that God actually wanted my happiness, constantly. But as soon as the first person started talking, I got hit with a wave of emotions. I didn't know why it was happening, so I asked if I could leave my testimony for another day. This was still bothering me later on in the day, so I went to talk with one of the people working here. I told him what was going on, and he explained that, based on what I was saying, it sounded like I was over-relying on other people for my happiness, and that if I continued to allow this way of thinking to dominate my life, then I would only cause myself more frustration and more heartache. Instead, what I learned from him was that God should be the one I depend on for my happiness, not other people. I was still processing this in my heart later on that night in adoration, when, all of a sudden, I experienced this moment of what I can only describe as pure grace. In that moment, I realized that only God could truly fulfill my desire to be happy. When I fully accepted this truth, it was like something clicked into place. I felt the Lord's presence. I felt His peace and His love for me. It was a profound sense of His deep, intimate love for me, personally, as if I were the only person in the room. In that moment, I felt more content and happy than I had ever felt before. Even after the holy hour finished, I was still on somewhat of a high. But I also knew that something had changed. I no longer felt the need to find fulfillment and happiness in what others thought of me. I understood that Jesus really was and always will be the source of my happiness. This experience really changed things for me. I now understand that God is looking out for me and does have my best interests at heart. Since then, he has helped me to redefine my core beliefs. Earlier, I mentioned that I had believed that my feelings revealed the truth about myself, God, and the world around me. But with God's help, he guided me to realize an important truth about my feelings, that my feelings are just that, feelings. They can vary, they can sometimes be true, but they can also lead me astray. I have come to realize that God's truth is constant and always reliable, whereas I can only see things from my incomplete, narrow perspective. God has a perfect view of me and my life. I have become aware of the fact that through all my trials and sufferings, God has always been with me. He has always heard my prayers. It's just that I haven't been very good at listening. I often get caught up listening to my feelings and what other people thought of me. I realize that he was listening to my prayers, even as a young boy when I asked to have a heart like his. It is through our sufferings that we learn to love others and to empathize with those who are going through their own pains and trials. I now know that Jesus didn't come to take away all my trials and sufferings in this life, but he did promise to walk with me through them. Like he says in the Gospel of John, chapter 16, verse 33, "In this world you will have difficulties, but have courage, for I have overcome the world." I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I have available to me here. The opportunity to be formed with the truth in catechism class, the chance to pray more deeply and more often, and for an amazing community who help me to grow even when I don't want to. Thank you for all your prayers and support of the mission, and thanks for listening. God bless.